Welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name's Gavin Debono. I'm a partner in the private business and family advisory division at Pitcher Partners here in Melbourne, and I'll be your host for this webinar. And I'm joined today by Nick Bull, who's a partner in charge of our business advisory and assurance division here in Melbourne as well. And he happens to have a passion for today's topic, which is productivity. So welcome, Nick.
Thank you, Gavin.
Okay, so today's topic is all about productivity. It's been a hot topic in the media of recent times, and we've just released our latest Business Radar report for April 2024, and our hot topic in that Radar report was productivity as well. Radar is all about hearing the voice of middle market businesses in Australia. And for this report, we did ask them about how they're seeing productivity within their businesses, what is contributing to either improved or declining productivity, and sort of what areas they're sort of focusing on to try and help improve their productivity going forward. Hopefully you've all had an opportunity to read the latest Radar report. If you haven't, it is available on our website, so please have a look, www.pitcher.com.au. So Nick, before we get into productivity in more detail, I think it is important to clarify what productivity means.
Yeah.
Throughout the responses in the Radar report, we did sort of see a few different themes come through, and I think it's safe to say that the responses sort of skimmed around the definition of productivity rather than hitting it on the mark. What have you got to say about, I guess, the themes that were coming through the Radar report?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, Gavin? I mean, I think we often try to, as advisors, try to understand what things are keeping people awake at night. You know, that's such a well-worn analogy for the sort of way we identify opportunities to be helpful. But with productivity, I think it's just so seminal, and I know you sort of indicated my interest in it. I think it's such an important lens to apply to opportunity identification and growth solutions that business leaders need to fixate on. And I think a lot of the times we have a lack of traction or a lack of responsiveness or confidence around that is just purely because sometimes it's misunderstood, and obviously without really sort of being demeaning in any way of people's general understanding. Productivity, it's so nuanced, there's so many different parts to it that it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what it is, and I think it's helpful to look at it as a lens. That being said, there's lots of measures out there that are talking about productivity being a challenge and an issue for businesses, but we thought really helpful in the survey to try and dig deep into how much commonality do we have around understanding what productivity is and isn't, and as such, how effective might strategies be in response to that understanding. And what we saw here with the top 6 definitional responses, it's quite interesting. Within that, I think there are, I mean, they're not wrong in terms of none of these answers are wrong, but some of them probably might fixate on things that we would probably see as being not necessarily indicative of productivity. So the ability to generate revenue or the ability to generate growth, just because production's increasing doesn't necessarily mean you're being more productive. And I think that's the big thing to take away from this. So I think we're going to talk about some of the environments, some of the structural challenges we have that businesses can't do much about, the broader economic environment where we sit with things like energy prices and the like, which are things are unavoidable, which make the headwinds around productivity even more difficult to navigate. But this sort of assumption, this definition around doing more with less, is just one element of that understanding of productivity. That's so cost cutting and being more efficient. Yes, that is a productivity initiative, but it's not the only one. Yeah. And really, it can be about doing more with the same or even more with more. And I think that's something that a lot of businesses and a lot of strategies sort of fall short on, and that's sort of coming through in our thematic responses here.
No, I think you raised a very important point there. It's not just about cost cutting, not just about efficiency. And a lot of the times when, especially in the media as well, we're talking about productivity, they do tend to focus on cost cutting and efficiency in that narrative.
And I mean, they are valid responses, and they're probably the easiest ones to do. But I think the environment we find ourselves in at the moment, they're probably not going to be enough. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail when we go through some of the background around where we find ourselves. So I think if you go to the next bit here about, just for everybody's benefits, got a very definition, a dictionary-based definition if you wanted to run through it.
So this is from the Oxford Dictionary. So just the effectiveness of productive effort, especially in industry, as measured in terms of the rate of output per unit of input.
Yeah, and as an accountant, as accountants, we love the nerdiness of this way of looking at it. But if you want to get in behind it, I mean, just the story of where we sit now in Australia, we have been very lucky that a lot of this stuff has happened organically for us. Even if you go back as far as the gold rush, we had an abundance of resources in a new country that we were able to go out, and there was plenty of resources and there was plenty of people and plenty of space to do what we need to do. And then we've had post-war growth, we've had immigration come through, we've had agricultural and manufacturing based economy, and then a resources super cycle. We've had proximity to China who want those resources. We've had international students coming in. We've had family units and households have more than one income. There's been a whole heap of tailwinds that have helped us really become a very productive country, and a lot of people call it the lucky country. And I guess the question is at the moment where we sit with both a challenge around climate change and energy costs, and also limitations on infrastructure. And we see an environment where we have inflation occurring, and that's a product of maybe we're running out of a little bit of luck. And luck's not going to cut the mustard anymore. We actually have to spend some time thinking about how we can be more productive and put those strategies into place. And there are some low-hanging fruit, but I think for long-term compounding growth, it actually is going to need a very deliberate and consistently applied and a lot of consistency around leadership around that to embed growth into our economy that is productive.
Yep. Yeah, we're sort of entering into a new phase now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Australia's grown up a bit. And
Australia is a mature economy now, predominantly services-based economy. But I think in the context of things, why I think productivity is so important is because it's accounted productivity in Australia that we've experienced. It's accounted for 80% of our national income's growth over the last 30 years. And it's probably the key determinant of real wages of growth. And at the end of the day, our standard of living. So this isn't about returns or capitalist, endeavours. It's about actually how well our country and our communities are thriving, and how us as a generation, what we're going to be leaving, experiencing ourselves, and also leaving for future generations. We have to take the baton and actually lead from a productivity point of view, and we don't have any of the free kicks that maybe we've had in the past.
Yep. And sort of a good lead in now to, I guess, productivity, as we sort of alluded to earlier and in your response just then. It is a key focus area at the moment, particularly in the media and at the government level. And on the screen there's just a few headlines just of recent times of articles in various different publications, all talking about productivity. It does seem to have a bit of a negativity bias to those headlines. But I guess, why all the fuss about productivity?
Yeah, and we just sort of skim the surface there, and this is a deep structural issue. And there's things from a government and policy point of view that has a big part to play in this. But a lot of what we talked about, this transitioning phase for our economy and the world we find ourselves in, whilst it's a global economy, there are some things that we're finding difficult to turn from effort into outcome. And we're getting diminishing returns. And that's not something that's just happening to us. Inflation doesn't just go up because time has passed. Wages don't go up from year to year just because it's the time value of money. That's all the system is entirely working on the assumption that we're being more productive year on year. And what we're finding is that that's not necessarily the case. We're putting more effort in than ever. Our employment to population ratio is the highest it's ever been. Yet we're not getting the outcomes out the other end. So something we need to have a focus. We need to have a conversation about it, and we need some clarity about it. It's not just on leaders. This is something that is organisational wide. It's a macro challenge. It's also an individual one. I think we each have struggles with how productive we are. What we're not suggesting is to work more. We're suggesting to work smarter.
Yeah. Well, we're all in the same boat when it comes to productivity.
We are.
So we all benefit. when productivity is improving. Now, I guess leading from those headlines, which were a bit negative, and you've alluded to it as well, that there are some headwinds when it comes to productivity. These are the results that came through from the Radar report, just talking about the future concern that middle market business leaders have in relation to productivity. And you can see there that over 50% are either extremely concerned or very concerned about productivity going forward.
Yeah. We exist for the middle market, and I think this was a really important survey because we don't hear a lot about their experiences, and Radar's been a great voice for that. And I think this is a really important takeaway from our survey around the challenges around productivity. I think you see large organisations are less worried about it. And I think you boil that down, and we don't have the details particularly, but if you're going to come up with a hypothesis around what's happening here, a lot of it is about access to resources. And I think large businesses are less worried about being able to access resources, people, or demanding certain prices. They are less worried about competition. Australia's the competition in Australia, whether it be banking or supermarket shopping or going to buy some homewares on the weekend and getting a sausage, that you've got an increasing rationalisation of options there. So larger businesses might not be as worried about this, nor about their ability to put in strategic change or demand that their workforce goes on the journey with them. What we see here, and this is why we think it's really important for middle market businesses to embrace this as a mindset and a lens, is that the challenge that is something that's concerning them, and their understanding of it and their responses to it aren't necessarily as effective as larger businesses. And you and I know, Gav, the middle market drives the Australian economy, and we're seeing that play out in the productivity outcomes. And so this is why this is such an important issue for us to talk about, and hopefully provide some insights so that people can take a better understanding from it and go away with a much more effective strategy in terms of making a difference, both for themselves and for our broader economy.
And productivity is all pervasive throughout the whole business organisation. Sometimes it can be hard to just pinpoint, what are we going to focus on as business leaders within our own organisation to try and improve that productivity. And we did get some insights from our mid-market business owners, where we did ask about what are the top sort of internal factors that they're facing within their organisation that are impacting productivity. And you can see here, these are the top 6 that did come through. Labour is playing a large part, and it's definitely on the mind of middle market business owners.
Yeah.
And you can see out of the top 6 there, 4 of them are really focused on labour.
Yeah. And this is just an Australian anomaly. This is a global challenge around as we move to a much more services-based, when you mature as an economy. So you can see this in Japan, you can see this in the UK. Australia is not the only one here, but it's very difficult to ensure that you have compounding increases, especially when it comes to labour. And, the segue from the previous slide around large businesses versus the middle market businesses and their access to labour, I think sort of speaks to that, your ability to access and pay more and access the necessary talent, but also necessarily direct that talent in the way that you need to unlock the productivity that's required, is probably less of a concern for larger businesses. But you see this here, out of all these responses we have, so many of them come back to talent. And, talent's the one thing that probably is the largest strategic challenge, because it requires change management, and human beings are key to so many businesses and the processes they have in place. So engaging them meaningfully and constructively with clarity around how we're going to get more, and the fact that that's win-win. It's not I'm needing you to work more, that we're going to be able to produce more, and that's a win for the business and a win for the employee, the team and the employees.
Yeah, well, I guess there's an effectiveness piece there and an efficiency piece there, which I know we'll get to a bit later in the presentation. But one thing that did sort of strike me is we've got, is it the 4th one there? Employee burnout. So you did sort of mention it's not about working harder all the time.
Yeah.
And I think, as you alluded to, people are very important and are the lifeblood of an organisation. So it's making sure that all of our people are being productive in a nice, effective, sort of looking after their holistic well-being way forward, rather than...
So much of this is about clarity. Right. Even that conversation there's fear attached to that. We need to be more productive. I think the knee-jerk response quite often might be, that means you need me to work more. or that you don't think I'm working hard. And the stats tell a completely different story. If you have a look at how much employment we've had, as I said earlier, our population to employment ratio is the highest it's ever been, and people are working more than they ever have, despite all of the advances that we've had around technology, that we've had around the other things that are there in terms of the commodity prices and the compounding growth within our economy that is being delivered. We're still not moving the dial on labour productivity. So something has to change.
We've got the stat there from the Productivity Commission.
Yes.
About there has been an increase in hours. This is for financial year 2023 of 6.7%, but they're not measuring a corresponding increase in output.
That's right.
So again, it's not just about working harder.
So, culture is such a hard thing to disseminate and build. It's something that happens day by day. It's not an easy fix. Having a clear strategy around that, engaging and communicating with clarity around what expectations are, and the reality that there's not a fear attached to that. It's not about judgment. It's about moving forward, because it's a necessary commitment on everybody's part in an organisation to be more productive year on year. And I think part of the fear around that is that we're going to get to this here is that so many business leaders think that strategic change needs to be transformational. And I think we've got an insight here from the Productivity Commission that most Australian businesses don't actually innovate, or and usually because they think that they've got to do something quite drastic and it is going to have a whole heap of risk and cost attached to it. So this one here, which I thought was really, really relevant to share, much productivity improvement could come from adoption of established or even dated technologies and practices. So I think we say in the report, one business's status quo could be another business's treasure, because just looking at scanning the market and matching the market quite often is enough. They're the 1%ers that make a difference. So many businesses are in a set and forget, or if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality, because the risk and the challenge of managing change is something that, or the cost that comes with that, or their inability to lead that strategy with clarity is something that's holding them back from making a difference on productivity.
Well, and sometimes, as we alluded to earlier, the problem might seem so big. So what is the direction that you take? And when we're talking about, I guess, uncertain trends out there in the economy and the marketplace, global, local, we're talking about technology as well, but maybe business leaders aren't that comfortable with in terms of their understanding of which way to go. Sometimes that can lead to a bit of inaction or hesitation in taking that next step.
And we've been we're talking today about productivity, but the radar survey also gives some great insights about where overall confidence is. And we're not operating in a bubble. There's a lot of disruption on the horizon, both locally. We've got the state budget this week and the federal budget about to land. There's not good news in that necessarily. There's not necessarily bad news, but there's no free hits. And then you've got other disruptions around the world. We've got a lot of elections happening around the world. So leaders are not necessarily at a position where it's like, if they feel like it's a fertile space to make a big strategic effort on this. But I think part of what we talked about, keeping you awake at night, maybe we're overthinking it a little bit, and it's just about having a very clear and simple strategy that we're working through methodically to find the opportunities to make those little incremental differences over time. And there's some frameworks there that we can talk about that I think might be helpful for the business leaders who are tuning in today.
Yep. I just do want to touch on that incremental improvements, I guess, and it's really getting a culture and a desire of the whole organisation to be focused on productivity, but improving processes and platforms and things that they do throughout the organisation, so that there are these 1%er increases and improvements in the output and also the efficiency, hopefully, and effectiveness of what's being done. Have you seen any good examples of that throughout your client base over the years?
Yeah, look, without breaching confidence, we can pluck some things out. I think the thing is, the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And I think the Productivity Commissioner has highlighted that most Australian businesses are doing that. They might have aspirations or intent, but most Australian businesses are doing the same thing year on year and thinking that they are going to be able to put prices up and pay people more, and it's all going to come out in the wash, and that's just not going to cut the mustard. So we I'm very reticent to go down sort of an acronym-based sort of solution. It sounds very consultancy. That we're trusted advisors for our clients. We want to help with solutions. We're not selling a pre-packaged outcome. But this is a good way for people to go away and think about how they might start. And obviously, we've used scale because I think scale is part of the solution for productivity. Because it makes sense, but it's probably not where you should start. You shouldn't start with the S. You should start with the L. Leverage is the opportunity. You've got to see where there's opportunities in your business to increase the value produced without necessarily and matching the competency within your organisation to deliver that value without necessarily incremental costs. So leverage is the opportunity. That's the lens you should start with, and that requires some listening. So the education piece and capturing the knowledge from doing that activity, and then that's going to inform where you go with standardization, centralization, and automation. They're the things that are going to bring effectiveness, not just efficiency, but effectiveness to your organization. And we've seen, I think if you apply sort of a waste lens, they're the low-hanging fruit. They're the things that are easy. Where have we got underutilized assets? Where have we got inefficient processes? Where have we got value realization gaps? They're the sugar hits. And you'd like to think that most business leaders are across those. But again, we can't be presumptuous about that. We need to actively engage with our organisation to find where they are. The hardest stuff's going to be going up and finding the effectiveness opportunities. So the things that provide the leverage. So solutions that are going to align with a deliberate strategy to do things differently. It's going to require change management. It's going to require an open and honest conversation with your people about the mutual benefit and going down that path. I've seen lots of things of low-hanging fruit stuff recently, whether it be inadvertently pricing things and not moving the needle on that, assuming that estimates that are provided by customers are accurate, and once you check them, that you can correlate them to actually where they should be. They're the easy things. If this was easy, though, everybody would have done it already.
Well, I guess the current environment of the inflation increases that's been happening over the last probably 24 months has sort of allowed that, I think, to creep in. So maybe there's a bit of a cover-up that's happening in terms of a reduction in productivity in organisations that have been able to be overcome by just increasing prices.
And a great business leader that I've worked with and learned a lot from, and I'll use his analogy because it might not speak to everybody, but I think it's a pretty clever one. The effective strategy in this space is like exercising a muscle. And if you're not feeling that fit, you maybe have had a good winter and maybe carrying a little bit, you need to go and do some workouts. Hitting the gym and trying to lift stuff as heavy as you can once every 6 weeks isn't going to cut the mustard. You need to go and do that day by day. Consistency beats intensity every time. And that's what I think. Sometimes the sugar hit stuff, oh, look, we're going to go and raise prices or we're going to cut costs. They're the things, they're the going and trying to lift the heavy weights every now and then. You've got to have a day by day deliberate focus on this. You've got to have an open conversation about it. And you've got to have a very clear and transparent strategy about how we're going to make this happen. How we're going to measure it and how we're going to realise it is just as important.
And I guess trying to get that into an organisation, there can be some, I think, relatively simple strategies that can be put in place to try and help elicit, bottlenecks in the process and other inefficient things that an organisation just over the years has ended up continuing to go down that same path and just not step back and think, okay, should we still be doing this today, or is there a better way of doing this today?
100%. And like the fundamentals. So most business leaders know what the most important thing that happens in their organisation to drive performance is. Sometimes there's some assumption behind that. So we like to ask the questions around how do you know? Yep. So how do you know that critical process or that critical piece of information that you're relying upon is allowing you to make the best decision? You might just be assuming that it's set and forget. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And just there's no reason to go and have a look at that. Pick that up, have a look at it. Make sure that's actually you're making decisions based on validated information and validated processes, not just an assumption around that. And work from the biggest and most important processes down. It's an issue of prioritization. And as we say here, once you get to that point, you say, okay, where are we doing things differently? Why are we doing it one way here and another way there? Can we standardize that? Why have we got all these people who are doing this task that they're not experts in, but they're adding it onto their role? That's holding them back from being more valuable and doing higher order work. Why don't we centralize that to a single resource? And even better, maybe we might be able to automate that. And I think that's probably the last little bit. I think there's been a lot of chat at the same time as the productivity discussion about AI and technology as a solution. It definitely is going to be very helpful, but it's not the starting point. You should not be seeing technology as the solution looking for a problem. You go through this process and figure out where the opportunity is there to launch an automation solution or a technology solution, but it's after you've identified the biggest opportunity that you have to make a difference. And we're going to talk about platforms as well too, which I think is a really good segue for that conversation.
Yeah. I guess just before we move on to that, like a practical takeaway that we can give our listeners today, because I think that continuous improvement process that you're sort of alluding to does need to involve the whole organisation. So from it's people on the floor, if it's a manufacturing business, all the way up to the CEO.
Yeah.
And I guess what's just an example of something that
we can't take credit for it. They're not a client of ours, but Oricon tell a great story about activity they call dumb stuff we do. And so that's just being a vulnerable, transparent process in their organisation where they basically ask their people to come back and say, tell us all the dumb stuff we do. And that's going to shine the light on the things that you can't see, the things that are in the dark corners, the things that you've made assumptions about. And it also tells your organisation that you're very much open to ideas and observations and perspectives that you might not have been able to access previously. And we've seen organisations run similar things, maybe not termed in the same way, maybe using some more colourful language than stuff. And we've seen that as being a very, very powerful way to both engage the workforce, but also get incredibly valuable insights you might not otherwise have been able to access and form up a very clear strategy. And when people are telling you the stuff that they are frustrated by or they don't understand, your likelihood of them engaging with a change around that and making that real and making that happen and the outcomes being positive are just overly enhanced over and above the alternative.
Yeah. That's quite interesting. I remember one of my clients who was in commercial printing. The owner would regularly just walk the floor and talk to all the printers and all the other people working on the floor.
Yeah.
And that's where he found out the areas that they needed to work on to improve the process.
Yeah. So not getting caught up on the buzzwords, but, the how do you know being validated by actual physical action to go and solicit that, and even just asking those questions about what's the dumb stuff we do and being vulnerable and genuinely curious and inquisitive about that, and then taking the action. You've got to follow it through and make sure it happens and is embedded, and the consistency that comes behind that. This isn't rocket science, but it's also not easy. And we understand that. But those who are committed to it and go through the process and do it day by day, they're going to be the ones that outperform. And, competition's a good thing. And that's what we really need in our economy. If everybody's doing this, it's better for us. Our standard of living is going to be better. We're going to have a better performance in terms of we're going to be able to increase incomes. We're going to maintain asset prices. As a nation, it's something we need to do, but it starts with us individually in each organisation as leaders.
Thanks, Nick. We did see also in those factors that the business owners sort of referred to as important to improving productivity. Two of them did focus on innovation and technology.
Yeah.
And you've sort of said, well, that's really a solution to help with whatever the problem is that you've worked out in the first place. Here we have the responses from our survey, mid-market survey responses. And most of these are areas that they're focusing on to help improve productivity into the future. And you can see there is a strong focus on technology.
And the survey speaks for itself. My personal opinion is over-reliance. I think it's the last piece of the jigsaw puzzle. And I'm not a technology denier. I'm an early adopter on a lot of stuff. But I also remember a time with the Internet of Things where my fridge was going to run my life for me, and that hasn't happened yet. So I understand there's a hype cycle. I have no doubt that AI and other tools are going to come in and make our life better, just as other innovations over time have over the last 50 years. But waiting for that or assuming it's going to do all the heavy lifting for you is, I think, is short-sighted. And I think we need to do all the other work to figure out where we're going to get the best bang for our buck here. and then this is the last piece of the puzzle, and this is going to give us that extra uplift. And it's going to be table stakes at some point. But if you're sitting at home thinking, I'll just wait for AI to come and replace all these key processes or individuals in my organisation, I'm not sure that's a short-term solution, nor I think we're in reality it's going to be a medium to long-term one. It will augment our productivity. It won't drive it. But that doesn't mean it's something to be dismissed, because it's an integral part of the overall solution. And that, as I said, the last piece of the jigsaw puzzle.
I think the key point there is once it does become table stakes, every organisation out there is doing it. So it's no longer a competitive advantage. It's no longer a productive advantage.
Well, you go back to the Productivity Commission insight, which we talked about from a 1%'er's point of view. Scan your market and figure out what everybody else is doing. If they're doing something in technology and you're not, then that's going to lead your thinking around that. But thinking that you're going to get first mover advantage, or this is going to be some sort of quantum leap, there might be some industries that's actually genuinely the case, but technology itself and AI comes with its own costs, whether it be energy, the cost of accessing it, whether it comes to cybersecurity, because it might increase your exposure to risk there. So they're not free hits necessarily either. So I 100% agree with the sentiment here, but I also think it's just part of the solution.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, Nick. We've got some questions that have been coming through. I'll just remind everyone, if you do have some questions that have come to mind, please send them through Slido, and we've definitely got some time to get to them. So the first question here, Nick, so where do you think businesses should be focusing first to achieve productivity improvement?
I think it's a great question, and we've been talking a lot about here. We're obviously talking about sort of three streams around people, processes, platforms, or if you want to call it technology. And as I said, I think you've got to start with your processes and your people, and the technology solution will come out as to where your priority there sits as well. So, go back to the scale model, that leverage piece, really saying, where are we wasting time? Where are we doing things that don't make any sense? And technology might be part of that solution. So I think it starts with the intent to be curious and to walk the floor and to ask the question. What that then lends itself to, it depends on the business. There's services businesses that are incredibly people dependent. They also have processes in there are very dependent. Some of them, by their actual nature, the technology will be table stakes. If you're not doing this at this certain level, you're not going to be in the game. So I think it's difficult to talk about priority, other than the fact that you are committed to this as a way of a lens applying to your strategy, and rethinking, and not just assuming that what you've been doing is going to be enough to maintain your business performance, and there's not other opportunities to be more productive out there.
Yeah. Well, I think further to that, certainly I'm seeing it within my client base and even Pitcher Partners.
Yeah.
But the world has moved on in terms of technology usage, the knowledge that people are expected to have. People are growing up now with different technologies and what us older people sort of grew up with, and probably seeing that maybe our learning and development programs aren't quite hitting the mark.
Yeah.
Have you got any thoughts on those
so
aspects?
On the education piece, I think it's been an area that it's difficult to have clarity about your IP capture. So acknowledging that the world's moved on. I mean, one of the great productivity leaps that we've had is around flexibility. The fact that we're doing this webinar remotely and people are able to dial in. We used to have to come into the city and make the time and get on the train and come to this room. We can now do this in a much more effective way. It doesn't interrupt people's days as much. They don't have to commute to here. So that's a good example. But this sharing of knowledge and how you capture it, and how that's accessible within your organisation, and then how that's passed down, so you get that continuous improvement. Because if you're just letting that walk out when people change, or contracts end, or roles change, that's the leakage, that's the waste we're talking about. So that compounding knowledge access is a critical part. Finding the right systems for your people and the right protocols for capturing that knowledge is critically important. So our organisation is a learning organisation. We have people join us from university and we teach them from in their first professional job all they need to know to be trusted advisors for their clients. And we spend a lot of time on that, and we can be better about capturing that information too. Things like this, and you and I have done an acumen session on this as well. It's been recorded and disseminated for people to digest, just in time, just enough, just for them, and access it in different ways. They didn't have to come into a training room on a certain morning and hear us and catch us at that one point in time. So that agility with knowledge is important as well. It's not just about finding the solutions, it's about sharing them and embedding them.
Well, I think people also are demanding more training, development, more knowledge capture.
Yep.
And I think the speed of learning these days is definitely a lot quicker than what it used to be. So
Yep.
it is a challenge, I think, for all business leaders out there to make sure that they're keeping their people engaged and up to date with all the latest learnings from whatever the sector is that they're working in.
And the addressable content is exponentially increasing, like how much information there is and being across that. So that's the rate of learning is trying to keep up with what you need to know to be relevant. And that's the thing we try and make sure we've got the breadth and depth in our organisation. And it's the same for if you're out there selling pumps or building locomotive engines. You've got to make sure that people are up to date with all the information, and it's out there, it's accessible. How is it coming into your organisation and being captured and created and disseminated and passed on?
We've got another question that's come through. We sort of half answered this a little bit, but how can I help my people work smarter?
Yeah, I mean, personal productivity, and you and I know, Gav, there's a lot of distraction out there. My phone's on silent at the moment, but at the same time, if I'm sitting at my computer, I get notifications about emails and Teams messages and invites to things, and there's meetings that people want you to go to. So there's a lot of noise. So when you're talking about the personal challenge, that's a representation of the broader challenge that businesses are facing, and then economies and nations are facing. So it is a personal commitment that we need to make as well, to make sure that we're making the most of the time that we have available to us. It's not infinite time. It's the one thing that we can't just keep spending time. There's only so many hours in the day. So minimizing distractions, prioritization, communication, clarity. There's some tools out there. You know, I try to manage my diary as best I can. I try and make sure that my interruptions are managed. My phone's on silent. It buzzes for certain people. Otherwise, checking in with the right channels to make sure that I'm across what needs to get done, and just being open and honest about the fact that I don't want to be unproductive. I want to make sure that we're getting. I don't want to waste other people's time, and I don't want to waste my own time. And that's not a cutthroat thing or a vindictive thing. It's a genuine commitment to being valuable. And so you think about how many meetings there are without agendas that go for an inordinate amount of time and have a whole heap of people invited to them shouldn't be there or don't need to be, but that's something to do. And just having that's so cultural about just saying that we're here to make a difference and to create value. So I respect you enough to value your time, and I value my own as well. And I think that's, from a personal point of view, that's pretty much the best you can do. There's a whole heap of everybody's role is different. There's different ways you can manage the tasks that you have, but I think just from a mindset point of view, that's a pretty good way to tackle it.
Okay. And probably just to add to that, everyone has their own strengths and also their own interests. So it's making sure that you sort of do know your people and what they are actually fond of and want to be involved in. And once you get them involved in those activities, generally you see a bit more productive work happening, engagement, and just a bit of happiness around the workplace.
And look, I know a lot of the stuff in here is about AI. Look, we're piloting some things with Microsoft that are pretty advantageous in terms of when you need to write responses that might give you a head start, but it still requires adult supervision. So, I use Copilot to write some emails, but I wouldn't be sending it out without me having a look at it based on some of the responses I've got. It's very handy for about 90% of the task, but you still need to spend the time. But that's meaning that I'm elevating my place in the value chain. I used to sit for a long time thinking about what I need to write. It's doing a lot of that for me, and then I just polish it up and make it my own. And communication is such an important part of this. And we've talked about culture a lot today. But if you're not connecting and engaging with your people, none of this is going to happen, because it's not going to be genuine, and nobody's going to buy into it. So I think there's a lot of things out there that if you're personally productive, it gives you the best chance to have the right outcomes beyond yourself.
I guess if we are going to focus on productivity, it really does need to come from the top.
Yeah.
We've got another question that has come through, which is, what do we as business leaders need to do to drive productivity improvements?
Yeah. I think the best businesses that we see, and we work with a lot of great businesses in the middle market, they are unapologetic about making this a priority. They're very clear about it, and they also are very clear about what their goals are and how they're going to measure that and the accountability around that. And they're prepared to make the investments necessary to deliver that. So you got to walk the talk, not just talk the talk, but at the same time, do a lot of listening. So it's, it might sound like motherhood, but again, statements, it is just a day-by-day commitment to the consistency around that. And also being vulnerable to the fact that sometimes you're going to get it wrong, and that's not the end of the world. And you pivot and learn from that, from the leverage and education point of view, and you go again, because it's actually critical for the survival of your business and the vitality of your workforce. I think there's sort of a good framework for leaders to apply. You cannot ignore this. You can't have your head in the sand. I'm not insinuating they are, but you've got to make it the centerpiece of the lens that which you apply your thinking day in, day out, thinking about every decision I'm making about what impact is this having on the overall productivity of our organisation, of this person, of myself, of the broader team, and how where that value is, because we're here to create value, not just for ourselves and the people we work with, but for our clients and our customers as well.
Yeah, it's got to be on the agenda, and constantly on the agenda. So it's not just 1 month that's on the agenda and then we move on. Constantly. Questions just come through. So what's your view on a 4-day work week and the claim that can actually boost productivity?
We were talking about this before. The highest productive countries in the world, some of them have that flexibility. I think flexibility is a big part of this, and it does when you're talking about overall economic flexibility, things that allow more people to enter the workforce and contribute, obviously help with the overall production of an economy. But the question is whether, again, as we've seen today, that needs to be productive increase, not just production increase. So it needs to be that the hours that people are working are actually producing more than they were yesterday, as opposed to just we've got more people working. So that's always the question, and it comes down to, as we've talked about today, the personal commitment to productivity and the organisation's ability to leverage that and access that. So you can't make assumptions that just doing something will actually deliver productivity. That's been made clear by everything we've talked about today. But countries like France, Ireland, the top 6 productive countries in the world are ones that have fairly good agility, workforce agility, skills agility. They're also, ironically, very low tax jurisdictions with high competition. That's not something necessarily that we have a lot of control over. But, they're Ireland, Luxembourg, Singapore, some of those are tax havens, Denmark, the USA, Norway, Belgium. They're sort of places that this sort of stuff isn't a big deal. We talk a lot about red tape and green tape. Some of this is about what comes with that, whether you can actually realise the upside or whether it's going to make it harder to manage your workforce. So my answer to that is, if your organisation has identified that as an opportunity and they think that they can deliver productivity, go for it. But again, it's a bit like technology. You don't find the solution and look for the problem to apply it to. If through all the work you've done here says, well, actually, part of our issue is we can't access the talent we need, but if maybe we're a bit more flexible, we could get the talent we need, and part of what people are looking for is this, well, then it's going to deliver on that. But I think just saying a policy is going to guarantee productivity is a little bit oversimplistic. But I think there's some merit in it for different organisations. It's very different to do a 4-day working week when you're a nurse in a hospital. there's shift work and things like that. So it's got to fit to the strategy of the organisation.
Yeah. Well, there was actually an article, I can't remember which paper it was in, earlier this week, where an organisation had implemented the 4-day work week. And I guess the key takeaway out of that was it takes a clear understanding what the expectations are of everybody in the organisation. So if you're going to go down a 4-day work week, what does that mean in terms of not just hours, but output that's required? And then it takes strong management as well to make sure that everybody, bottom all the way up to the top, are sort of adhering to what those agreed parameters are.
Yeah, it was in the AFR, and we've done quite a few sessions with it. Inventium, which is Amantha Imber, and Amantha's been in here a few times. We use a lot of the knowledge that we again captured from doing those sessions around innovation with Amantha and her organisation. And again, it's one of those ones where I think she's reflecting that I think organisationally that needed to be an overarching strategy. You've got to workshop, if I'm doing this for some people and not for others, how's that's going to work culturally? Is this something the whole organisation benefits from? And again, this goes down to where's your biggest opportunity, as opposed to here's some things I'm reading about in the paper that some organisations are doing that works for them, apparently. It might work for us. You need to work through this process of saying, well, what's our biggest challenge? Is it talent? Is it the fact that we need to be more flexible? Is it that we can't get the right people? Is it that we can't get the right skills and expertise into people? Maybe we need to start, if we can't get people coming out of university or out of vocational learning that meet our needs, we're going to have to start training our own people, building an element of our business that gets our people to have unique skills that can't be acquired anywhere else. That's something like we've been doing as a firm in terms of running a program to create exactly the sort of skill set that we need in our people, because they don't come out of university or school ready with that. And that's an investment we need to make to be uniquely skilled and resourced to deliver on our strategy. It's not the easiest way to run a business. It's not, it can be disruptive at times because it's about getting development opportunities to people. But we think in the long run, it delivers an outcome that means that you can't replicate what we do. The people who are here are genuine unicorns that have a skill set and experience base that they wouldn't have got anywhere else. And we can't just go and pull that off Collins Street. We've got to go and build that. And so, again, that's, Matt has been very honest about that. Again, being vulnerable, listening in our organisation and reflecting, and also saying there's lessons, and then embedding those lessons into their strategy going forward. I think it's an excellent article if people haven't read it.
Thank you. Questions are firing through at the moment. To put you on the spot here, Nick. Are there any stupid things, I guess in Pitcher Partners they're referring to, that we've identified and tackled that we can share?
I think that sometimes with processes too, again, it's this, and your reflection on the business leader walking the floor, we can get caught up in sort of what we think are higher order issues that are going to have a bigger impact, but there's things that we don't know that are sort of might be accumulating in other parts of the organisation that we have no appreciation for the pain they cause. So things like time recording or processes with onboarding or training that we just assume because they've been running the right way, and we have never had an issue before, that they still are giving us the outcomes that we want. So we're again, from an organisational point of view, we're completely committed to being vulnerable about that and continually reviewing what we're doing to see where there's opportunities, and then working on a basis of priority. So there's lots of stuff. No organisation, anybody who says hand on heart that they've got it nailed, they're probably got a big problem coming. And I think that's something that we sort of, in the survey, we're trying to uncover a little bit, was, how aware are you for the organisations to say this isn't a problem for us, and how their level of confidence and the correlation there. I think, you don't want to insinuate that something unfortunate's about to happen. It's a bit like Kodak not being worried about digital cameras, or Sony not being worried about CDs coming out and just running with the Walkman. Like they're again higher order issues, but complacency is a killer in this space. And there's some things you can't control. We've got an energy trilemma where, quite rightly, we want to have sustainable options, but there's a problem: you can't have sustainable and cheap and reliable. And I don't think we want to be living in an environment where we don't know whether the electricity is going to be on tonight. So, we've got sustainable and expensive electricity at the moment, and we're transitioning our infrastructure around that. But there's some things that are unavoidable. There are other things you must engage with and not be make assumptions that you don't have to worry about them. So, being completely honest, without oversharing, there's so many things that we have to work on as an organisation, and that's a good thing, because that means there's opportunity out there. So this is sort of interplay between fear and opportunity. And if you can flip the script on that and say, look, actually, this is something we need to do and it's going to be exciting, as opposed to I'm a bit worried about what we're going to find and how much change we're going to have to digest. That's culturally very important to drive success and productivity at the end of the day. And remember, productivity, I think, is a lens. It's not the end game. It's not like he or she is the most productive wins. It's actually just about continuous improvement over time to remain competitive and relevant and have prosperous outcomes for the organisation and the people who work in it, and great outcomes for the clients and customers who work with them.
Yep. Thank you, Nick. And probably just people out there, so that was a very high level response, Nick. So thank you, just bringing it down a level. We have a lot of templates to automate processes in our organisation. Part of our role is, if you look at tax return preparation, we do have some automated processes there. And one thing that we did find out was that some of the automated processes that we have actually only do like 90% of the process. And it wasn't until you find out why are people doing all these other things around the site that you realise that we could have made a small little tweak and got 100% of that process automated. So you just feel a bit silly while that is occurring without you really realising what was going on.
Yeah, and even just on the scale process there, like we've done the dumb stuff. We do exercise. We do that sort of try to do that annually, if not semi-annually. That's identified some things that we weren't doing in a standardised way, whether it is the way that we do work or the processes we follow. We found that resource allocation was becoming an increasing burden because of just the sheer agility that's required to service our clients' demands as and when. We want to be as responsive as possible. So you can't just say, I can't help you yet. So we want to put really responsive resourcing in. So that was being left to people who are also responsible for delivering the service, not experts in resourcing. Bringing in a resource manager as an expert to do that and centralising that task has had a huge impact. Same with training. We brought training people in who previously we left that to be ostensibly on the job with our professionals. We have somebody whose passion and skills are enhanced around training, and they've come in and they're taking responsibility, not all responsibility, but they're augmenting the learning that's happening in our organisation. So we've seen we're walking the walk, not just talking the talk on this whole process around leading into where the opportunities are and making the productivity strategic implementation happen. It's never over. That's the thing. So it's not done. And we'll do that process again around sort of taking a stock take about where we're at and things we could do better, where the education piece is, and again trying to find ways to get that leverage in our organisation and matching the skills and expertise about people to the opportunities to create value. I think increasingly I'm confident this sort of process of thinking for business leaders is going to be very, very powerful if they are brave and work past the fear and don't necessarily think they have to commit to transformational change. It's just 1%ers, incremental commitment, consistent over time.
I guess sometimes being a business owner or a key decision maker in the business can be lonely, and you might not have a network of people that you can talk to. You might find that there's common problems that organisations are finding, and certainly that is the experience that we sort of have when we're talking through with our clients. Is there anything you can sort of suggest to sort of help, create some connections amongst business owners and business leaders?
Without being overly salesy, because it's not really our style or culture, but obviously we see that as a critical role as advisors for our clients in terms of a sounding board for that. Obviously, we're obviously respectful of confidentiality and the like with maybe in the competitor set, but just asking about how things could be done better based on what we see, because we see a lot of different businesses and a lot of different industries, and get to see what better practice looks like. And I think there's a lot of chat in the broader dialogue in the marketplace about best practice. And that makes sense for the big end of town to talk about best practice, because they've got the resources, as we've seen in the graph. They're not worried about managing the change that's required because they've got the resources to spend. Best practice is applicable for a very, very small part of our business community. What middle market businesses need to do, and that's the productivity commissioner has just validated that, is just look for ways to make their practice better. And the great source of that is the networks that you have, but also the advisor that you have. So picking the phone up and talking to your trusted business advisor, and if you don't have one, then you can find one in this building. It's a great way to just sense check those how do you know questions, that dumb stuff we do, and to help guide you through that process. Because professional loneliness and isolation, a lot of the times your knowledge base is limited to the four walls with which you operate in. You might have people join your organisation from other places who come with ideas from that place, but the best way to tap into knowledge about how to be better is to talk to people who have the access to that on a continuous basis, because it is a day-to-day thing and things evolve quickly. So having that conversation is really powerful. And again, lowering the bar. I think a lot of fear is like, if we're not doing best practice, and I understand those charged with governance in a ASX top 100 company want to know that it's all being ticked off, but middle market businesses just need those 1%ers, and there's lots of those out there, and the conversation with your trusted advisor should uncover them.
Now, I guess one positive, with the technology, and we can have webinars like this where it's just you and me really in the room with some people in the back there, making sure everything's working as it should, is you actually miss the opportunity of gathering in a place where you're in person with 200 or 300 people that are listening, where you can actually then mingle and discuss particular matters that might be of interest with those other people. Yeah, so networks, beyond that, the networks that are provided there. So this great, we do a lot of work with Vecchi. They're a great organisation in terms of providing a platform for engagement. We've got our own business networks. We've got our Critical Point network for those who work with our insolvency practitioners. So there's leaning into those is really important too. But again, there's also a wealth of knowledge within your organisation. So the listening part, both inside and outside your four walls, is critical. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you very much, Nick. We've run out of time. And to all our viewers out there, thank you very much for those questions. They were great questions to add at the end there. I guess just one key takeaway, maybe, Nick, that you can leave. Just vulnerability about this, and a commitment to having a conversation and listening, and realising it doesn't need to be transformational. It just needs to be incremental, and consistency beats intensity every day of the week. Excellent. Thank you very much, Nick, and thank you, everyone.